Hello, and welcome to Lyla's Lullabies, where we spend time exploring with Lyla, a traveler who wanders the world at her own pace, while sharing her most enriching and restorative moments with you. In tonight's story, we'll follow Lyla as she explores the fascinating Australian city of Sydney. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to remember. Just settle in, get comfortable, and let yourself go. We're so glad you're here. Whenever you're ready, let's begin. Lyla woke to unfamiliar sounds. Kookaburras laughing in the trees outside, the distant rumble of traffic, voices speaking with that distinctive Australian accent that always made English sound both familiar and foreign at once. For a moment she was disoriented, and then it came back. She was in Sydney, at her friend Adelaide's house, after the long flight from Los Angeles that had deposited her here, exhausted and disoriented last night. She barely remembered the ride from the airport. She checked her phone, 10 in the morning. She hadn't slept that late in a while, but apparently the jet lag had knocked her out completely. When she emerged from the guest room, Adelaide was in the kitchen making coffee, still in pajamas, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked up and grinned. "There she is. I was beginning to wonder if you'd died in there. I checked on you around 7, and you were completely comatose. Didn't even move when I opened the door." "Not dead, but maybe unconscious," Lyla admitted, accepting the cup of coffee Adelaide handed her. "That might have been the deepest sleep of my life. Jet lag is no joke. 24 hours on planes will do that to you. I remember the London to Sydney flight when we met. We were both zombies by the time we landed." They'd been seated next to each other by chance, both traveling solo, and had bonded over the wonder of spending only a day in the air and ending up on the other side of the world. Adelaide had been returning home after working abroad for several years, and they'd joked about her name, given to her by her father when they were living in Europe where she was born. He'd intended it as a gift to her, as if she could carry the hope of his birth country with her wherever she found herself. And, just maybe, it would eventually bring her to Australia someday. "Did it work?" Lyla had asked. "The name, I mean. Is that why you came back?" Adelaide had laughed. "I'm back more in spite of it than because of it, I think. But it seems to have worked, so maybe he was onto something." Now drinking coffee in Adelaide's kitchen in the Sydney suburb of Newtown, Lyla felt grateful for that chance airplane meeting and for friendships that somehow persisted across continents and time zones. "So," Adelaide said, her eyes bright with mischief, "I have a surprise for you today. First stop is going to require a bathing suit. Do you have one?" "I do, actually. Figured I might need it in Australia in November. Where are we going?" "You'll see. Trust me." An hour later, properly caffeinated and dressed with swimsuits under their clothes, they took a bus toward Bondi Beach. The November day was beautiful. Spring in Sydney, warm but not yet the brutal heat of summer, the sky impossibly blue and clear. The bus wound through neighborhoods that gradually became more beachy, and then suddenly there was the ocean, brilliant blue and sparkling in the morning sun. But a little to Lyla's surprise, Adelaide didn't take her directly to the beach. Instead, she led Lyla along the coastal path to the southern end of Bondi, where a distinctive building jutted out over the rocks, its white Art Deco curves unmistakable against the blue water. "Bondi Icebergs," Adelaide announced. "One of my favorite places in all of Sydney. It's a saltwater pool built right into the rocks. You're going to love swimming here. It's an experience." The pool was a long rectangle filled with seawater, built at the edge of the ocean, so that waves occasionally crashed over the side, sending spray into the pool. The setting was spectacular. The pool's white lanes, stark against the deep blue of both the pool water and the ocean beyond. They changed in the facilities and walked out to the pool, joining the morning swimmers, serious lap swimmers in the lanes, others just floating and enjoying the setting. The water was cool but not cold, refreshing in the warming day, and Lyla dove in, swimming a few laps before simply floating on her back, looking up at the sky and feeling the gentle rock of the water beneath her. Adelaide swam up beside her. "Pretty incredible, right? This might be the most beautiful pool I've ever been in. The waves coming over the side. It's an amazing sensation." They swam for almost an hour, sometimes doing laps, sometimes just floating, occasionally getting splashed when a particularly large wave crashed over the side. The sun was warm on their faces, and the water was clear enough to see the bottom, the painted lanes bright against the pale concrete. After swimming, they showered and changed, then went to the Icebergs café, which had views over the pool and the ocean beyond. They ordered flat whites, Australian coffee being serious business, Adelaide noted, and avocado toast with poached eggs, the kind of breakfast that felt virtuous and indulgent at the same time. "All right," Adelaide said as they finished their coffee, "now we get our steps in. The Bondi to Coogee coastal walk. It's about 6 kilometers, absolutely beautiful, and we can stop for lunch in Bronte." They started at the Bondi end, joining the stream of walkers, runners and sightseers on the clifftop path. The route hugged the coastline, offering constant views of the ocean, beaches, and rocky headlands. The path was well maintained and easy to follow, and the November weather was perfect for walking, warm sunshine tempered by ocean breezes. The first section took them past Tamarama Beach, a small but beautiful beach tucked between cliffs, its surf bigger than Bondi's, a few dedicated surfers catching waves. The beach was less crowded than Bondi, more intimate, and they paused for a moment to watch the surfers before continuing. The path climbed and descended, following the natural contours of the coastline, each turn revealing new views. Native plants lined the path. Coastal banksias with their distinctive bottlebrush flowers, native grasses, and hardy succulents that thrived in the salt air. Bronte Beach appeared below them, another gorgeous stretch of sand, and Adelaide pointed out the Bronte Baths, ocean pools similar to Bondi Icebergs but smaller, built into the rocks at the southern end of the beach. "We could swim again if you want," Adelaide said with a grin. "You know, it's kind of hard to pass up," Lyla laughed, "but let's keep going." They descended to Bronte and found a cafe near the beach for lunch, sitting at an outdoor table with views of the sand and surf. They ordered fish and chips. When in Australia, Adelaide insisted, and the fish arrived perfectly crispy and flaky, the chips hot and salty, served with lemon wedges and tartar sauce. After lunch they continued the walk, passing Clovelly Bay with its protected swimming area, and then finally arriving at Coogee Beach, the official end of the coastal walk. The beach was busy with families and sunbathers, people playing volleyball and swimming, the atmosphere relaxed and happy. "That was stunning," Lyla said, looking back the way they'd come. 6 kilometers of pure beauty. "Sydney does coastline pretty well," Adelaide agreed. "Now, next stop, completely different vibe. We're going to Paddington." They took a bus from Coogee inland toward Paddington, and the landscape shifted from beachy to urban, the neighborhoods becoming denser and more Victorian in character. Paddington was a neighborhood of beautifully restored terrace houses, rows of attached Victorian homes with ornate ironwork balconies and facades painted in various colors, the streets tree-lined and charming. "This reminds me of London," Lyla observed as they walked down a street of particularly beautiful terraces. "The architecture, the density, but sunnier." "Definitely sunnier. That's Paddington exactly. Very Victorian, very British in design, but unmistakably Sydney in feel. It's one of the city's top neighborhoods now, but it used to be more, I don't know, functional, workaday." They walked along Oxford Street, Paddington's main thoroughfare, browsing in boutiques that sold everything from Australian designer fashion to handmade jewelry to vintage homewares. The shops were interesting without being pretentious, and Adelaide clearly knew the neighborhood well, pointing out her favorite places and greeting shopkeepers she recognized. In one boutique selling Australian-made clothing, they spent time looking at pieces by local designers, beautiful dresses and separates in natural fabrics, the aesthetic distinctly Australian in its casual elegance. Lyla found a linen shirt in a soft sage green that she couldn't resist, and Adelaide bought a pair of handmade silver earrings. As the afternoon advanced, Adelaide suggested they head towards Circular Quay. "I know it's touristy," she admitted, "but you really can't come to Sydney and not see the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge. They're iconic for a reason." They took another bus toward the city centre, and as they approached Circular Quay, the harbour began to reveal itself in glimpses between buildings. And then suddenly, there it was, the Sydney Opera House, its distinctive white shells rising from the harbour's edge, even more striking in person than in photographs. They walked around the Opera House, admiring it from different angles, each perspective offering a new appreciation of its revolutionary design. The shells caught the afternoon light, creating patterns of shadow and brightness, and the setting on the harbour with the bridge visible in the distance made the whole scene almost impossibly picturesque. "It's really something," Lyla said, standing on the broad steps that led down to the water. "Photos don't do it justice. They really don't. I've lived here for years and I still stop and look at it sometimes. It's one of those buildings that's just awe-inspiring." From the Opera House they entered the Royal Botanic Garden through the gates nearest the harbour. The gardens were extensive and beautifully maintained, with sweeping lawns, mature trees providing shade, and themed garden beds showcasing both native Australian plants and exotic species from around the world. They walked slowly through the gardens, following paths that wound past ponds where ibises wandered, through groves of massive Moreton Bay fig trees with their incredible buttressed roots, past gardens of native waratahs and banksias in full bloom. The gardens were busy with people, families picnicking, couples walking hand in hand, tourists taking photos, office workers enjoying a late Saturday afternoon break. The path eventually led them toward the city, emerging near the edge of the central business district. From here they walked toward the Rocks, the historic neighborhood at the base of the Harbour Bridge, where Sydney had first been established as a colony. The Rocks had a completely different character from anywhere else they'd been that day, older, more densely packed, the narrow streets and sandstone buildings speaking to the area's colonial origins. But it had been extensively restored and now housed galleries, cafes, pubs and shops, maintaining its historic character while serving contemporary purposes. "It's Saturday," Adelaide said with satisfaction, "which means the rocks market." The market filled several streets, vendors selling everything from handmade jewelry to vintage clothing to original artwork to gourmet foods. They browsed slowly, stopping occasionally when something caught their eye: a stall selling handmade ceramics, another with vintage Australian travel posters, a vendor offering samples of local honey and preserves. As the afternoon shifted toward evening, Adelaide led them to the Museum of Contemporary Art, housed in an Art Deco building at the edge of Circular Quay. They didn't really have time to browse the collection. Instead, they took the elevator to the rooftop café, which offered spectacular views across the harbour. They found a table on the terrace and ordered tea, proper afternoon tea with scones and jam and cream, an incongruously British tradition that somehow felt perfectly at home in Sydney. The tea arrived beautifully presented, the scones still warm, and they settled in to enjoy it while watching the harbour. The view was extraordinary. The opera house from this angle, the harbour bridge spanning the water, ferries crossing back and forth, sailboats catching the late afternoon breeze. The light was beginning to shift toward that golden hour quality, everything taking on a warm glow. They watched as the sun sank lower, the sky beginning its transformation. The harbour water became a mirror for the changing colours, and the white shells of the opera house caught the golden light and seemed to glow from within. The bridge's steel framework turned to bronze in the slanting light, and the whole scene took on a dreamlike quality. Other café patrons were similarly absorbed, conversations quieting as people turned their attention to the view. A few people had cameras with serious lenses, but most just watched, content to experience the moment without trying to capture it. The sun touched the horizon behind the city, the sky blazing in shades of orange and pink, the scattered clouds catching fire. The harbour birds, seagulls and ibises, and the occasional pelican, flew across the colourful sky, their silhouettes dark against the brightness. A ferry crossed the harbour, its wake catching the coloured light, and for a moment everything seemed to pause, suspended between day and night. As the colours faded and the first lights began to glow across the city, Adelaide suggested they head to Newtown for dinner. "There's a Thai place I love that has live jazz on Saturday nights." "That sounds like a perfect Australian mashup," Lyla said. They took a train back to Newtown, Adelaide's neighbourhood, and walked through streets that had a completely different energy from the touristy harbour area. Newtown was eclectic and artsy, with vintage shops and record stores and cafes that stayed open late, street art covering walls and laneways, the atmosphere relaxed and creative. The Thai restaurant was on a side street, its entrance marked by a simple sign, and the sound of music drifting out into the evening. Inside, the space was warm and inviting, with low lighting and tables packed fairly close together, the walls decorated with a mix of Thai art and vintage jazz posters. In one corner, a small stage held a piano, bass, and drum kit, and 3 musicians were playing softly, their jazz providing a gentle backdrop to the dinner conversations. They were seated at a table near the window, and Adelaide ordered for them both pad thai and green curry and som tam, along with Thai iced tea. The food arrived fragrant and beautiful, the flavors bright and complex, the heat levels perfect. They ate slowly, sharing dishes, the jazz providing a soothing soundtrack. The musicians were skilled, playing standards with subtle variations, listening to each other, with the kind of attention that made the music feel like a conversation. The pianist had a light touch, creating space between notes, and the bassist provided steady foundation, while occasionally taking melodic leads. The drummer used brushes instead of sticks, keeping the sound soft and intimate. Between sets, one of the musicians, the bassist, a woman with short grey hair and an easy smile, came to the bar for water, and Adelaide struck up a conversation, asking about the music and how they'd ended up playing Thai restaurant gigs. "We play all over Sydney," the bassist explained, her accent pure Australian. "Clubs, cafes, festivals. But we love this place. The owners really appreciate the music, they feed us well, and the acoustics are surprisingly good. Plus, Thai food and jazz. It just works." "It really does," Lyla agreed. "We try to keep it mellow for dinner service," he continued. "Later tonight we might get a bit more adventurous, but right now we're just trying to create a nice atmosphere. Music should enhance the experience." He smiled and winked at Lyla. The bassist returned to the stage and they began another set, this time with something slightly more up-tempo but still restrained, still perfect for the setting. Lyla found herself closing her eyes occasionally, just listening, letting the music wash over her. Adelaide noticed and smiled. "The jet lag might be catching up with you again." "Maybe a little, but I'm not tired, just content. Really, really happy. Thank you so much for this beautiful day." They finished their meal and ordered more Thai iced tea, not quite ready to leave, content to linger and listen. The restaurant had filled up, and the Saturday evening energy was warm and convivial, people clearly enjoying themselves, the jazz providing a thread that wove through all the conversations and laughter. Lyla sat back in her chair, listening to the music and watching the restaurant. The piano was tracing a melody that seemed familiar, but which she couldn't quite place. Something that hinted at a standard, but was transformed enough to be fresh. The bassist followed, adding harmonic depth, and the drummer kept time with such subtlety that you felt the rhythm more than heard it. She thought about the day, waking in Adelaide's guest room to kookaburras, swimming in the spectacular Icebergs Pool, walking 6 kilometres of stunning coastline, wandering through Victorian terraces and busy markets, watching sunset over Sydney Harbour with its iconic bridge and opera house. She thought about Adelaide and their unlikely airplane friendship, about names that carried hopes, and how sometimes those hopes worked out in unexpected ways. The jazz continued, the musicians finding their way through the melody together, each one contributing something essential, the whole greater than the sum of its parts. Outside the window, Newtown street life continued, people walking past, shops still open, the occasional burst of laughter from a nearby bar, the distinctive sounds of Sydney at night. The music shifted again, becoming slower and more contemplative, a ballad that seemed to capture something about the evening itself, the gentle satisfaction of a day well spent, the pleasure of good food and good company, the particular contentment that comes from being exactly where you're meant to be. Lyla let herself drift with it, her thoughts becoming as fluid and unhurried as the melody, carrying her through memories of the day like the tide carrying foam across sand, gentle, persistent, leaving traces of beauty in its wake. The piano notes fell like rain, steady and soothing, with the bass providing ground beneath it all. The drums whispered time into being, and Lyla floated there in the warm restaurant with the taste of Thai tea on her lips and the sound of jazz in her ears. She thought about ocean pools and coastal walks, about opera house shells catching golden light and harbor waters reflecting evening sky, about kookaburras laughing in morning trees and cities that somehow held beach and culture and history and art all at once, breathing together under the Southern Cross.